All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. This may evolve into a series of videos on this topic. Um, Honestly, I've had probably some of my most watched videos have been about this topic, and I ended up finally getting this book. I didn't actually own this book, but by chance, I was walking through a thrift store and I saw this book and I was like, holy crap, Batman. I need to get this book. Heaven and Hell, Don Felder, My Life in the Eagles from 1974 to 2001. Felder does great interviews, and I did a lot of my critiquing and analysis based on the interviews that Felder was doing, places like Howard Stern, and then the dude who I think worked for Stern, he had his own show, and can't remember that guy's name, but he did a really good interview there. And then pretty much all over the place. In the aftermath of this book, I was watching a lot of that footage, and I was absorbing some of it, but this book is really, it's kind of a page turner in places. I'm right at the section now where Bernie Leadon has left the building. And this is following the incident where he dumps the beer on Glenn Fry's head. And we learn through all of the debauchery that's going on in the book, and there's just a ton of it. I mean, these guys, they were legendary, and it's described in detail here on how debauched they all were. And Felder, who's married and has a kid at home and another one eventually on the way, he eventually succumbs to all of these women who are basically everywhere. And he said, I dare any man to resist this kind of temptation. Well, you put yourself in that place, Don, and I guess you have to put yourself in a different place if you don't want the temptation, but you're part of this amazing band. But what I'm thinking here, Bernie Leadon, much like Peter Cetera, all right, except Bernie Leadon had no he had no budding solo career. He didn't just write a bunch of the band's biggest songs and so forth. Bernie Leadon was being ignored. His songwriting was different. It just came off different. Don Henley called it smarmy cocktail music, especially the tune where he says goodbye to the Eagles, apparently. The tune called I Wish You Peace, which his girlfriend, Ronald Reagan's daughter, Patty Davis, I guess gets a writing credit on it. And it doesn't really fit all that well with the material on One of These Nights. I think Bernie Leadon wrote some decent material for the first couple of Eagles records, no question about it. But you can't deny the fact that Don Henley and Glenn Fry were basically saying, hey, we're the Lennon and McCartney here. You guys, like Felder ends up being like George Harrison, except again, Felder, with all apologies to Don Felder, he's not George Harrison when it comes to maybe songwriting. Although, you know, again, if you had equal creativity and maybe somebody who can kind of herd these cats and get these alpha males to come down from their perches a little bit and work together rather than work separately and then bring ideas to the table and then have Henley and Fry say, nope, we've got better ideas. And you can't really fault the judgment of Henley and Fry. You can't fault it. You would think maybe they might try to integrate what the other guys are doing into what they're doing, and maybe you'll get a better product and maybe you won't. I don't know, but this isn't really conducive to a long-term harmonious relationship with members of the band. People are leaving. Randy Meisner leaves, but that's later. But Bernie Leadon walks out the door, and in the documentary, it's kind of like, hey, we traded Bernie Leadon for Joe Walsh. Now, Bernie Leadon is a great player. He just plays a lot of stringed instruments that aren't plugged in. I mean, he can play electric guitar, and he does some great soloing. And he is, I mean, Felder praises Bernie Leadon all the time. So it was a matter of, do you want to be the Flying Burrito Brothers or the Byrds? Do you want to integrate more of a bluegrass sound, or do you want to integrate more of a rock sound? And these guys from the get-go wanted to go more rock than country. What's ironic is the country music industry helped revive the Eagles in the 90s. They were key. Those guys that went out and did the tribute album, they were all, country giants at that moment. And they're like, hey, we were all influenced by the Eagles, but it wasn't Heartache Tonight or necessarily even Hotel California that they were influenced by. It was those first 2 or 3 records, which maybe up until one of these nights, a lot of the material on those albums had a country rock sound. And so it's kind of weird. Bernie Leadon ends up cleaning himself up, saying, I don't want to be into this debauchery anymore. I'm tired of living this lifestyle. He was trying to go out and get himself cleaned up. He was surfing, hitting the beach, enjoying a much just cleaner lifestyle. And you got to wonder that when not everybody is in doing the thing, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I've seen this in other group situations where you don't want to partake with us. When I was younger, I used to get excoriated because it was like, well, Dave, everybody is taking a hit of this, and I never touched a drug. Never. Not even close. I inhaled some smoke, I think, one time at a party, and I was like, I'm out of here. It just never appealed to me. I mean, I'm not, dissing anybody who does or did and so forth. It just, I had a stop mechanism that said, no, I'm not doing this. And I think of Peter Cetera when he left Chicago. He had cleaned himself up. He knew he could write great songs, and, he had this song in his back pocket on top of it, which would launch his solo career. Bernie Leadon didn't really care. He did record an album with another gentleman, and that album escapes me right now. And it's a really good album because it harkens back to the sound that they created for the Eagles in the early 70s. And for Bernie Leadon, it's much more like consistent. It's consistent compared to his writing in the Eagles to some degree. So he got that out of his system, and obviously had some albums that came out later as well. But it's really interesting. These guys, I think, they might have been ticked off a little that Bernie wasn't, he's not interested in partying with these guys anymore. Randy Meisner ends up, saying, I'm out. Between the arguing and the partying, it really created a tough situation for everybody. I mean, you got to bring Tim Schmidt in, who is the nicest guy on the planet, to replace Randy, who was also one of the nicest guys on the planet, because these guys, their lifestyle had become so debauched that they were starting to repel people. And Felder, who came in and tried to be a good boy with his marriage and everything, he couldn't do it. It was just too much temptation all around, and he succumbed to that. So it's really interesting. You don't get that too much out in the media, that Bernie Leadon, he wasn't necessarily forced out of the group. He was, he saw the writing on the wall, number one, with the songwriting credits and the direction the band was going in. And again, you don't fault them for going in that direction. But I think if they had played it where Bernie's role could have been, I don't know, it could have been more prominent, but yet they could have still gone in that direction. Maybe it's not doable. Maybe it was because the egos were too strong, and you can't fault the Eagles for going in the rock direction, but you look at their earlier material, the stuff that they recorded from the early 70s and their first greatest hits album. Bernie Leadon had a huge role in that stuff. And that is the #1 selling album, I believe, of all time. So you have to look at, maybe Barney was an important catalyst. If they had kept that sound going, they could have, in the 70s, right till the end, to probably like the very early, like 80, 81, you could have probably sold that sound for a little bit longer. I think once you hit the 80s, then you have to start to adapt. And, you have to be more rock, and you've got new wave and punk out there. The Eagles could have rode that sound a little longer. They could have written more songs like Lion Eyes and Best of My Love and so forth. And I think they would have been fine. But, they did what they did, and they're one of the greatest bands in the world. And to just go back and Monday morning quarterback all this stuff is pretty interesting. But this book, I'll be doing more videos about this book because it's just very fascinating to me, told by Don Felder. It's almost better than watching the Eagles documentary. I know a lot of people like to watch things rather than read things. This is one case where the reading, I think, is better than the watching. And I'm sure I'll have some interesting conclusions by the time I get to the end of the book. So again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and yes, $1 a month over on Patreon, where we can talk about this book and any other topic that you might be interested in discussing. All right, folks, I'm done. I will be back soon. See you then.